With the release of Legends ZA, the next major game to come out is going to be Pokemon Champions. Between Mega, Terrestrialization, Dynamax, and Z-moves, it'll be an incredibly fun and dynamic metagame. Although we don't know everything about this game, it's never too early to start making bold predictions about who we think will be great, who we think will be okay, and who will have almost no usage. Let's get right into it. Primal Groudon, Primal Kyogre, and Mega Rayquaza. Pretty much any meta they've been a part of, they just absolutely dominate. So starting with Groudon, it had 70% usage in 2016, it won in 2019, it's a monster, right? And coming back, it will still be a monster. And a very important distinction, or I guess prediction, is the fact that we don't know how the regional gimmicks will interact with each other, which is important when you consider the fact that Primal Groudon is not Mega Groudon. So there's a high chance you'll choose one of the regional bracelets. You'll either get Mega, Z, Dynamax, or Terrestrialization, and then that's what you get for the battle, or maybe you choose each individual battle. Regardless, Primal Reversion is likely going to function independently of any of that. Just like how Zacian and Zamazenta, they get their items that gives them buffs. The reason that's important is because there's kind of this joke going around of Gigantamax, Terrifier, Mega Charizard X, which, is possible, but it's kind of this ridiculous hypothetical. I don't think really will happen. If it happened, then who knows? But there's a very real chance that we'll see a Primal Groudon be able to Terra Fire, or if it really feels like it, Terra Grass Solar Beam, or it can Dynamax to double its health and then just hit really hard as if it didn't already. So it's a very important distinction when talking about Primal Groudon, that it also can stand next to Megas, but it also might be able to stand next to your Terra Pokemon, or it might be able to stand next to your Dynamax Pokemon, which gives it a lot of versatility. Additionally, Groudon gains a lot of new partners. As when it was used in 2016, it was on a team that was referred to as the Big Six. None of them really cared about fire-type attacks. When you compare the Groudon teams of 2016 to the Koraidon team that just won, the Koraidon team that just won, you have Koraidon itself, Brute Bonnet, and Fluttermane, who all just absolutely love the sun. And so when you look at the Groudon team, none of them really care about the sun, except Groudon itself. Salamence sometimes can run a coverage flamethrower, which, yeah, the 50% damage boost is nice, but that's not as strong as its aerial light attacks. And Talonflame, I think, had Flare Blitz on some of the sets, but again, Talonflame wasn't there to click Flare Blitz. It was there to do Tailwind and Gale Wings and a lot of not fire damage is what it was there for. Now, we got a lot of crazy Sun of users. Fluttermane, Raging Bolt, Brute Bonnet, Roaring Moon, Chi-Yu. I love Solar Power Charizard as well. The potential for Sun teams is now way higher, and with the ability to, the lack of ability to be overwritten, you have just some of the craziest, some of the strongest Pokemon now with a really good Sun boost that wasn't available in the past, because again, Fluttermane, one of its big weaknesses was Urshifu Rapid Strikes hitting through its Focus Sash. Desolate Land bans water-type attacks, which includes Surging Strikes. Chi-Yu, again, really didn't like to be on the receiving end of any water attacks. Now the Sun is just going to remove its weakness. The other major changes since Groudon was last legal is Dynamic Speed, which, if you don't know what Dynamic Speed is, makes sense. I thought Dynamic Speed was introduced a lot earlier than it was, actually. It was released in Sword and Shield, to my surprise. But it's a system where speed changes that happen during the battle impact the turn that they happen on. So, for example, if my Whimsicott with its Prankster sets a Tailwind for my Groudon, facing my opponent's Miraidon and some other partner, then my Groudon, which didn't outspeed before the Tailwind, but now can outspeed in the Tailwind, will be allowed to attack and take the Oko into Miraidon, which is a very important change for a, not slow, because Groudon can use Trick Room, which I'll get to, but Groudon's not designed for Trick Room. But it also did really like Trick Room, as because it is slower than the fastest Pokemon, that you could use Trick Room in the past. Again, this Big Six team, it didn't use Trick Room because it liked Trick Room. It used Trick Room because Xerneas hated Trick Room, which is why Bronzong was so common on variations of the Big Six. But now there's some Pokemon that really, you put them in Trick Room and they just win the game. between Ursaluna, Ice Rider, and Armorers, the ability to click Trick Room and then attack for 2 turns and then the game ends is like way more common now than I think it was when people were clicking Trick Room in the past, really just cancel out the Geomancy buffs. Up next is Primal Kyogre, and of the Hoen Trio, Kyogre's special form is probably the least impressive of all 3, which is why Kyogre actually had the most usage in the most recent metas. And even going back to Sword and Shield, it had a very high usage rate, despite not having its special gimmick Primal Form. However, this Primal Form is still very important in a meta that has Primal Groudon, because although Primal Groudon Sun can't be overwritten by any other rain setter, it can be overwritten by Primal Kyogre. And now, that's very important, as without Primal Kyogre around, Primal Groudon would simply run rampant and ruin the game. Koraidon's Sun can be overwritten. Koraidon's Orichalcum Pulse does not have the ability to overwrite Primordial Sea of Primal Kyogre, which effectively means Primal Kyogre will ruin Koraidon team. I mean, they literally cannot get Sun up unless they have a partner Primal Groudon. And if you're running a Sun-based team and your both restricted are Koraidon and Groudon, you're really opening yourself up to a lot of problems. Primal Kyogre also really likes dynamic speed. See, Kyogre doesn't really like to use its signature move Origin Pulse. It is the exact same as Groudon's signature move in the fact that it's 120 base power, spread 85 accuracy, but Kyogre has a better move. It has the move Water Spout, which is 150 base power if Kyogre is at max health. Now, if you have a system such as dynamic speed, is the opponent really now has to match that Tailwind, because very, very few things can take a Water Spout in the rain from a Primal Kyogre. And so it's really going to enjoy that new dynamic speed buff. Last, but certainly not least, is Mega Rayquaza. Now, unlike the 2 primals, Mega Rayquaza is actually a Mega Evolved Pokemon. So, using the assumption that you have to choose one of the 4 regional gimmicks, Mega Rayquaza will have to take that Mega slot, as well as set you on to Mega Evolution only. As when you look at Sun and Moon, it couldn't use Z-moves, which is kind of why I've come to my conclusive hypothesis that I think you'll have to choose one of them, and then there's a chance that Z-moves will work alongside. Like Primal Kyogre, it's a very reactionary Pokemon to Primal Groudon. You need a counter to Primal Groudon's Sun, or else you're in for a big problem, as Primal Groudon is only weak to 2 types. But when you let it run rampant with its Desolate Land, it actually loses its ×4 weakness to water. And so, Mega Rayquaza is the only other Pokemon that can overwrite its Desolate Land. Mega Rayquaza often used what was referred to as the Ray Ogre Core, which is a Mega Rayquaza and a Primal Kyogre based team. The Ray Ogre Core has seen different variations, from the one Wolf won Worlds in 2016 with, and to the one that was used a lot in 2019 to try and counter Primal Groudon. Speaking of that 2019 one, of the 6 Pokemon that were used, only 1 of them was actually legal in Scarlet and Violet, with the form that it used in that game. And of course, that one of 6 is Incineroar, because why wouldn't it be? But Incineroar is actually a very important topic to discuss when it comes to Mega Rayquaza as well, because just like how the primals are unique, Mega Rayquaza is also very unique, as it doesn't need an item in order to Mega Evolve. Now, in the past, you would often give it something like a Life Orb or a Choice Band to give it a boost to its power. But when Incineroar came around, Incineroar and other Intimidate users were constantly trying to lower the attack of the 180 base attack Mega Rayquaza. And so now, an item has been released called the Clear Amulet. This item prevents your stats from being lowered by your opponents, meaning if you can set up a Sword Stance, you're running a ×2 attack for the end of the battle until you either switch out or you lose your Rayquaza. And unlike in Scarlet and Violet and Sword and Shield, Delta Stream, you lose a ×4 weakness to Ice only being ×2, a neutral Electric, and that becomes a resistance, and a Rock weakness becomes a Rock neutral hit, which means it can take a lot more attacks because it still keeps its flying type defensive bonuses. It's still immune to ground. It still resists fighting. So bringing back that defensive piece means setting up with your now Clear Amulet Mega Rayquaza means extreme speed or Dragon Ascent or any move it decides to click really is going to be very hard to survive and very hard to slow down the Pokemon in general. The next group I'm going to talk about is the X and Y legendaries, which is Xerneas, Yveltal, and Zygarde. Now, starting with Xerneas, I've talked about Xerneas a lot in the past. I have an entire video dedicated to just why Xerneas was so strong and would it be so strong in the current meta. To quickly just use the conclusion of that, Xerneas on its own might not be the most intimidating in the new highly powered meta, but when it's used with a partner, that's when it becomes really scary. Because when you have it next to something like a Calyrex Shadow, very few Pokemon can actually survive the double up of an Astral Barrage and Dazzling Gleam. Now, combine that with something like Geomancy or Nasty Plot, and you have a very powerful duo. The other thing that's really nice about Xerneas is that it'll get access to Terastallization. Unlike the Primals and Mega Rayquaza, Xerneas doesn't have some regional gimmick, even though it was released next to Mega Evolution. But it can now take advantage of Terastallization, as it didn't really like Dynamax in the past for various reasons, but now it can very much take advantage of this Fairy Terastallization to do way too much Fairy damage, or it can take a defensive Terra and try to set up a Geomancy, as like Calyrex, when it sets up a Nasty Plot, it can really just spiral and win the game right there and then. In a similar vein, we have Yveltal, who also really enjoys going solely into its one Dark type, so either could use that Terastallization to have a more higher damage output, or it can use it defensively and try to support its allies, which a very interesting ally is Urshifu Dark. Those two were legal for a short period of time together, but at that period of time, if you weren't running Zacian, you weren't really winning. So we never got to see the true strength of a Dark Aura Urshifu Dark. Additionally, it's very good into Calyrex, both forms, because they are either weak or ×4 weakness to Dark type, meaning you can force a Terastallization and then have some form of counterplay based on what you expect the 2 or 3 different Terastallizations to be. Finally, we have Zygarde, and I really don't know what to say about Zygarde, because Zygarde in the past has never actually been that great or that usable, honestly. But with Legends ZA, it got a new Mega Form and a new signature move, and we don't fully know what its ability is going to be. Like, it might just be Aura Break, and I guess it's alright. We also don't know if we'll be able to even start with 100% form Zygarde and then Mega Evolve it, and then now it has 216 special attack and a base 200 power spread Dragon type attack that hits through the Fairy immunity. Zygarde really could just ruin the game. Just flat out ruin it. It also could be completely unusable or just not available, which really wouldn't surprise me, because that thing, again, if that's released, VGC's dead. VGC's dead, or every team runs a Chen Pao with max attack. I think that could take the KO. I hope it doesn't ruin things. I really hope it doesn't ruin things, but it very much might. So I've been talking in groups of 3, but finally we have just a Pokemon to talk about. I guess technically it's 2 Pokemon. It's Ultra Necrozma, as it can take the form of either Duskmane or Dawnwings. There's a very real chance that Z moves function independent of the regional gimmicks. As I said earlier, Mega and Z moves were usable at the same time, so there's a chance you'll be able to Terra your Calyrex and then use your Z move on your Ultra Necrozma, which is just, ridiculously high base stat. It's a great Pokemon all around, so having it maybe not as your main threat, it's still a very scary Pokemon to have around. It was used next to Primal Groudon in 2019 and it got second. The modern meta it's not great, but it could be a very good partner at taking out all the pretty much non-restricted threats, as it's just so strong and really be doing my job if I didn't at least mention it or mention its potential. And on the topic of potential, a lot of really powerful Pokemon that are returning are the Tapus. Last time they were legal, they weren't really that impressive, because if you have a bad matchup in the Zacian, you just can't be used. That's why Xerneas was really bad in the 2022 circuit, because Zacian was so powerful and so prevalent. Now, Zacian usage has really tapered off. I think Zacian usage will increase, but that's regardless. The reason I think the Tapus will be very powerful going forward is because their ability to overwrite the terrain. Because in Scarlet and Violet, there were really only 3 usable terrain setters, being Indeedee, Rillaboom, and Miraidon. But that's really boring as a metagame, actually, to have only 3 people to set terrain, so let's bring back in Koko, Lele, and Feeny. Now, sorry Tapu Bulu, but Rillaboom is just a better version of everything that you do, so get in the axe. Starting with Tapu Koko, what it can do is it sets the electric terrain. And the reason that's so important is that a Miraidon without its electric terrain takes a heavy penalty to its ability to do its electric type damage, as it loses both Hadron Engine and the terrain itself. Having a Pokemon that can just come on in next to it and be like, oh, yep, you got your terrain back, have fun. It's really good to have it next to a Miraidon, or just, again, that ability to be immune to Spore is incredibly powerful. Plus, Koko itself hits very hard. At the time Electric Terrain was released, it was a 50% buff to electric attacks. Now it's only a 33% boost, which is probably for the best, especially after the release of Miraidon. But it's not as powerful as before, but it's still very, very good. Up next, we have Tapu Lele. Tapu Lele likes to set the Psychic Terrain, which will block your priority attack, which is important for a Shadow Rider who does not like to take a Sucker Punch or a Shadow Sneak. Just like Koko, it's very good in and of its own right. You can set it with the Psy-spamming Trick Room teams. It just generally being Psychic Fairy gives very good coverage into a lot of Pokemon. Well, so Indeedee's not a bad Pokemon, right? It has Follow Me, it has Fake Out, it has Trick Room, it has Helping Hand, right? It's a great support Pokemon. Sometimes your team you don't need another support Pokemon. You need to kill Pokemon, or sorry, knock out Pokemon, to end up winning the game. So having a Tapu instead of a just support-based Indeedee, being able to set up that Psychic Terrain for you is a very valuable asset when Pokemon such as Sneasler in Terrain was becoming a very popular threat. Having a Pokemon next to it that's like Tapu Lele instead of a Choice Scarf Indeedee male, or you just set the terrain and then you leave your Indeedee, I guess. I think it will again bring it much more options in going forward. The last of the relevant Tapus is now Tapu Fini. Tapu Fini ends up setting the Misty Terrain. It has the Water Fairy type, which is a very good typing. Is I think the slowest of any of the terrain setters, at least of the Tapus. So it will get its terrain more often than not when compared to the other ones. Now, the reason Misty Terrain is actually very interesting is that it also blocks Spore, but in the past there weren't really any Guts Facade users that were really great until Ursaluna came around, and oh gosh, that Pokemon is ridiculous to say the least. Ursaluna is incredibly powerful. It doubles the Facade power. It has Stab, and it has Guts, so it gets another boost. It's incredibly powerful, and now you can just send in Tapu Fini, set up your Misty Terrain, and you're good to go. Now, those teams will likely then have something like a Tapu Koko with it. That way, you can then set the Electric Terrain and still be immune to the slow Spores. I mean, you can have Lele for the Psychic Terrain, because Psychic Terrain and Trick Room often go together, as Psy-spam Trick Room is a common threat. Just from talking about these 3 Pokemon, you can already see the ability to adapt and make changes to your team just by adding a couple of Mons with good abilities that we didn't have in the past. And finally, to end the Sun and Moon circuit, we have the Ultra Beast. Now, pretty much every Ultra Beast that was actually used is amazing into Xerneas. They are either Steel or Poison type, so they can just ruin Xerneas' day, and which actually roughly equivalates into the Terra Fairy Shadow Rider, as those two function pretty similarly. I think Shadow Rider is actually more powerful, which will probably get people up in arms if I say that, because don't worry. I think Shadow Rider is more powerful. I'm not making that argument here. I've made it in the past. They usually all function pretty much as support pieces. They function as Trick Room pieces. The Kartanas especially are very, very powerful offensively, but they're never going to be the focal point of a team, because Pokemon like Kartana are just so frail that you don't want that to be the focal point of your team. But they're all very good. They're all very good. They have great type coverage in the Fairy, which Fairy Translation, probably the most common translation you would see. And plus, they all had a ton of usage when they were legal as well. So maybe not each one individually had a crazy amount of usage, but all of these Sun and Moon based Pokemon that aren't around today, I mean, together collectively had a huge share of the meta. So their return will be very, very nice at spicing things up and really making big changes and big impacts to the metagame. Now we're actually talking about the Megas, and the normal Megas that also can't hold a Clear Amulet, which is, again, very important. The Clear Amulet is a huge item that nerfs Intimidate, which when you consider some of the really pressing Megas being Salamence and Mawile, both run Intimidate, having that Clear Amulet around, I think, is very important. But also, I think we're just going to see a lot of Intimidate, especially with Primal Groudon, Life Orb Miraidon, Ursaluna. Intimidate will always be good and has gotten a little worse, but we also now have more viable Intimidate users, because in the past, the only Intimidate user we really cared about was our guy Incineroar. It's Mega Salamence, Mega Mawile. We have a lot better Intimidate users now. Sorry, not better than Incineroar. No Pokemon's allowed to be better than Incineroar. My bad, I know. But better in comparison to the non-Incineroar Intimidators. So, as I just mentioned, I said Salamence. Let's start with him. One of the things about Megas that's really interesting is that their abilities change when they Mega Evolve. And this is very important for Salamence. Its normal ability is Intimidate. It also has Moxie, but its normal ability is Intimidate. That means you can Intimidate when you send them out, and then you can Mega Evolve and get your new ability, which is Aerialate, which turns normal moves into flying type moves and gives a small power boost to them, which actually ended up getting nerfed. It's still very good, as moves like Hyper Voice and Takedown turning to flying types, is there's not really any good flying type moves to begin with. So having this dual attacker with now very powerful stab boosted and then another boost flying type attacks is very threatening. It also has the ability to set Tailwind, one of the new Tailwind setters that it didn't gain crazy popularity. You would see it on some teams here and there, but it was Roaring Moon. But it's not as good as, I would say, Mega Salamence after that, as it doesn't have, again, that Intimidate ability. It doesn't have Aerialate. It's using its ability for speed, not power, so it's less defensive, and it's not as offensively powerful. So a return of Mega Salamence wouldn't be too surprising to me. And another Intimidate user is Mawile. Mawile is an interesting one, because it has the ability Huge Power, which doubles its attack stat. That means Mawile, with its with its Fairy Steel, can end up hitting very hard with its Huge Power, and plus it has that Intimidate ability. So you can still get both usage out of it. I'm not the biggest Mawile believer, I'll admit. Especially when you compare it to something like, well, I guess the Intimidate, but when you compare it to something like Zacian of that same typing, it's not the best anymore. At the time, that was a very unique ability. With Zacian gaining more popularity in this meta, which is my prediction, you will have more Pokemon, or at least more teams, that are built to counter that Steel Fairy type. So Mega Mawile, which Steel Fairy was very interesting when it got it at the time, it's not going to be as powerful. But that's still, the ability to get Intimidate off and then have a very strong attacker afterwards is great. Speaking of that Intimidate, we have Metagross. Just like these two, what makes Mega Metagross so good is its original ability is Clear Body. Clear Body makes Metagross immune to Intimidate, and then you can Mega afterwards to get Tough Claws. Base Metagross is already very powerful. It's pretty slow. It can function Trick Room, can function out. It's like Groudon, it doesn't really care which one it's in, but it likes both, but it's not the best in either. It has great bulk and it hits very hard. It's just high stats, great Pokemon. You Mega Evolve it, its stats become even better, become on par with Legendaries and Restricteds. It has an ability that gives it another boost to its physical attack, and it gains a boost to its speed. So Metagross can outspeed and hit very hard with two pretty good types. Just in general, Metagross matches up great into Xerneas, which is, remember, Xerneas will likely be on a lot of teams. Another Mega that got really heavily nerfed is Mega Kangaskhan. Now, Kangaskhan's an interesting one, because unlike Salamence, which got like your ability gives you like 10% less damage now, Mega Kangaskhan's ability gave it 25% less damage, and it lost one of its best moves, Power Up Punch, as Mega Kangaskhan's ability is Parental Bond, meaning all attacks hit with a second time, which means all effects come in a second time as well. So Power Up Punch, which whenever you hit, you get a boost to your physical attack. Parental Bond, the boosts are now a times 2 boost, whereas instead, a plus 1 boost is very good. A times 2 boost is the equivalent of clicking Sword Stance. But now, you're clicking Sword Stance and potentially taking a KO into your opponent. Like, it hits very hard. Mega Kangaskhan, what it didn't lose was Stab, Parental Bond, Fake Out. Normal type is usually pretty underwhelming. When you look at Pokemon like Ursaluna, you see this thing where normal types are powerful if the Pokemon itself is very powerful, as they have very few weaknesses. And so because they have very few weaknesses and very few things that they hit not neutrally, meaning that if you have a very strong normal type, it's very hard to deal with it and to resist it without running a very determined typeset, which for Mega Kangaskhan, the only types that resist it are going to be Rock, Steel, and then immunity by Ghost. So what you can do is then place it next to a Primal Groudon, and Primal Groudon now hits 2 of those super effectively. And that means that Kangaskhan, despite these heavy nerfs, had a lot of usage even after these. So, as I said, there's a lot of new good Pokemon that love the sun. And the best sun setter that isn't Primal Groudon, it's Mega Charizard Y. Because one, unlike most sun setters, when you click the Mega button, you then set the sun at the start of the turn, which is important if one person sends out their Pelipper and I send out my Charizard, and then we'll be in rain, but then I'll click the Mega button and then we'll immediately be in the sun at the start of the turn, but the Pelipper can't overwrite it unless it clicks like Rain Dance, which means it's a very good sun setter, at least at the start. And then even after that, its sun setting works the same way. Plus, Charizard hits very hard with moves like Heat Wave, it gets Solar Beam, Mega Charizard Y is a great special attack stat. So, I don't know if it'll be great in the restricted meta, where you have Pokemon like Primal Kyogre running about, and you have Primal Groudon, who just is a better sun setter. But in those non-restricted metas, Charizard Y with these new sun pieces is very scary to me. The last Mega I want to talk about is Mega Gengar. Now, there's a lot that I could say about Mega Gengar, but I'm really not going to. Yet, right now, I will make a prediction. Mega Gengar will win a major tournament. And the reason I am so confident in that prediction is because Mega Gengar is the best Pokemon at using a gimmick known as Perish Trap. Its ability Shadow Tag prevents non-ghost types from switching out without using some form of move, and it gets the move Perish Song, which puts every Pokemon that hears it on a 3-turn timer. So, obviously, as you can imagine, you click Perish Song, and now your opponents can't switch out to get rid of that timer. But Perish Song and Perish Trap really don't have amazing results. I mean, it's won a couple of tournaments here and there, and no one can use it that well, except for one person, Wolfglick, who is the only player, really ever, to win with Perish Trap. And he never has lost with Perish Trap, is the thing. It is this crazy chess-like gimmick, game plan, whatever he's doing. Somehow he keeps winning with it. He won Worlds with it in 2016. He won the European Internationals, having to use Pokemon like Screamtail and Gothitelle to get this gimmick down. He will win with Perish Trap at least once when Pokemon Champions release. It is fait accompli. Now, I would love to talk about the new Megas from Legends ZA. Problem is, we just don't know enough. We don't know what these Pokemon's abilities will be. For example, as I mentioned with Kangaskhan, Normal type is very good if you're a good Pokemon regardless of your type, but Mega Kangaskhan isn't really that good without Parental Bond. I can look at these new Megas and go, oh, well, this type is good, these guys have good moves, maybe this and this, but we might see Mega Malamar get Simple Contrary, and any prediction that I make doesn't matter if it has an ability like that. Or we might see Mega Victory Bell have Thick Fat, and we're like, okay, well, that's cool, but Mega Victory Bell really needed a big ability to be good, like Kangaskhan did. It didn't get that, so now it's not usable. So making predictions about these new Megas, unfortunately to me, is kind of a waste of time, or at least it's kind of futile. I mean, it's at least interesting, but it's not going to have really any accuracy as compared to any of the other predictions, I feel. And that actually goes with a lot of the changes made in ZA as well. Like, I know a lot of people right now are talking about how Greninja just got the access to Nasty Plot, which is really cool and exciting. Magikarp can use Hydro Pump in that game, so we don't know. Especially because setup moves in ZA don't aren't like, I don't actually know even how they work. I played the game. I don't think they times 2. They might time. They do their own thing. Magikarp has Hydro Pump, so I'm not going to take ZA changes, at least yet. Maybe when we are closer to champions, we can talk about the major changes going into that, and I will include the changes in ZA. But for the moment, we just don't know. And when we just don't know, yeah, we can try to make educated guesses like I'm doing about the regional gimmicks, but I think that has some form of precedent where Magikarp has Hydro Pump now. So, it's its own thing. To finish, we're going to talk about the current meta and what major changes I think are notable. So, starting with the Calyrexes, both of them see Yveltal as a big problem. It either outspeeds and hits super effectively, or it resists it and hits ×4 effectively, really. So, neither one really want to see Yveltal in this game. However, Shadow Rider loves to see Xerneas in its game. As I said before, the potential of a Astral Barrage Dazzling Gleam combo, or Astral Barrage Moonblast, or Setting Up, or any sort of combination of those two seems very hard to stop and seems very powerful, both offensively and in terms of just putting yourself in a position to win the game on the next turns. As for Ice Rider, there's a lot of good Trick Room abusers. The main ones I think of are Stakataka and Celesteela. So there's some good, there's some bad for both of them, but I think with just more restricteds in general and more Pokemon in general, assuming that all the Pokemon actually are in Champions, there's apparently leaks that won't be true, but assuming that at some point all the Pokemon are legal, I think they'll lose some of their share of the meta, less to the fact that they're being outclassed or just counterpicked, and just the fact that the more teams there are available, the less I think one team really tends to dominate. And so moving on from the Calyrexes, we have Miraidon. With the amount of new terrain setters, or I guess returning terrain setters, new to Miraidon, it's a lot harder for Miraidon to get that boost, because when you have Pokemon like Lele, who will overwrite the terrain, and then without the electric terrain Hadron engine, with the now damage reduction from Misty terrain, Miraidon is not too happy to see a lot of these new Pokemon. Now, of course, Tapu Koko could be a good partner, but like I said before, with Koraidon and Groudon doubling up, you're really now betting all into one electric basket. And speaking of Koraidon, it really just, I don't see Koraidon being too popular. It can't overwrite Primordial Sea, which, yeah, if you want to run a Sun team, you're going to run a Primal Groudon. Like, I can't imagine, unless we see a new way to play Koraidon, I don't see it having too much relevance in a meta that has Primal Kyogre around. Next, Zamazenta. He's also not too thrilled about the return of Primal Groudon. I will say that its partner Chen Pao is pretty excited to see Mega Rayquaza. It's not going to like the E-speeds, but it'll still probably take the OHKO, even on a one-time super effective ice attack. Same thing, it's probably excited about Mega Zygarde. Chen Pao is likely the only silver lining to the existence of Mega Zygarde, so Zamazenta might not be too thrilled, but its partner most definitely is. Zacian, the glow up for Zacian is coming back. Zacian has just the most positive of positive matchups into Xerneas. It has a great matchup into the Tapus, and with the return of Dynamax, its signature move is actually interesting. So Zacian usage is like really, it's going to be, yeah, will it be as good as he was in the past? No, but Zacian usage is definitely going to be there. Next we have Terapagos, which is the final of the actually new restricteds that are sort of used. Terapagos lost a lot of its usage, but it's still worth to talk about. The only thing we don't know about Terapagos is Terraform Zero versus Desolate Land, Primal Sea, and Delta Stream. Personally, I think it's unlikely Terapagos can overwrite them. I don't really have any evidence, as I don't think there's sort of a matchup that's similar. Like, you can argue Cloud9 is fairly similar, and Cloud9 does overwrite them. I think Terraform Zero won't overwrite them, because Terraform Zero is like a one-time effect, and I don't know, it might not. So depending on if Terapagos can or can't overwrite, I think we'll pretty much be determining if it's usable at all. Like, Terapagos, once we hit the dual restricted meta, just like fell off a cliff. You just couldn't set up with it. And it wasn't hitting hard enough when it wasn't set up. If it can overwrite, it'll be good. If it can't overwrite, it'll be in for a pretty rough time with the extra new powerful Pokemon. And the last Pokemon that really had a meta share that I think is worth talking about is Lunala. Lunala was really happy with Primal Groudon. They won together in 2019. Lunala has been next to pretty much every restricted like Xerneas, and so it's a support base. There's nothing that I think is really terrible for Lunala. I mean, Yveltal's not great into it, but Lunala didn't want to see a dark type in the past, so Lunala usage will be variable depending on the strength of the teams, really. I don't see what people see in Lunala, so I can't really say if it'll be good or bad for Lunala, but it is not going to be catastrophic either way. To go over everything one last time for a quick conclusion, I think the primals are going to be a massive threat. People like to talk about how the power scaling of modern games has gotten out of control. And I think that's fair to some extent. Like, I think the power scaling is less fair than it was in the past. Groudon doesn't have 100 points now to its attack stat. It only gains about 30 points. But I still think they're powerful as is, so they will be a massive threat, especially with the amount of Sun abusers. Xerneas is going to be a just great partner restricted. I think the ability to deal with both of them in a timely manner before they can just run away with the game is very difficult, and I think that'll be a lot of how teams are built in Pokemon Champions. Figuring out how to deal with Xerneas and Calyrex Shadow Rider core. Speaking of, though, I think Yveltal is great into the Calyrexes, so maybe we will end up seeing a lot more Yveltal simply as a counter pick to Calyrex. I think we will see Intimidate just dominate. Between Megastones, the Orbs, and Z Crystals potentially being back, the held item won't be Clear Amulet anywhere near as much as it was in the past, and we have some better Intimidate users around. I think the Terrain Wars will finally be interesting. In the past, they always really bored me between Rillaboom and Miraidon, because that was all it ever was, just the constant switching of those two Pokemon in and out. But now we have a lot of interesting Pokemon that can do a lot of interesting things with their terrains and not just be a terrain setter and then just kind of disappear. Finally, Mega Zygarde. Who knows? Mega Zygarde is a mess. It'll be fun. It'll be funny. We'll see. It might ruin it. It might not. It might never even be in a competitive game. But Mega Zygarde exists to some extent, so it will be interesting. But I'm really excited for Pokemon Champions. If my tone in this video has not made that apparent, I think the more options that we get into these games, I think we get more dynamic metas, and the more dynamic a meta is, the more you have to pay attention, the more things change, the more you can adapt, the more new teams, the more different teams, the more it feels like you're not just making a flowchart of how to win each game. So I'm very excited for Pokemon Champions. I am excited to see what happens. I'm excited to see all the changes. If anyone has any meta predictions they want to discuss, that can be commented. I'm only one person. I can only make so many guesses. I looked at everything I could. I'm really excited for Champions. I hope the game's really good. I hope it's fun. I hope it plays well. When it comes out, I think I'll make tons of content around it. So that's also good for me. But for now, that's all. I can't wait for the future of Pokemon. I think it'll be really fun, and I hope you enjoyed.